because now Gavin is mad that they nationalized the California Guard. Trump has that ability, and people said, no president, they have to request it. No, they don't. You think that JFK said to George Wallace when he nationalized the Alabama National Guard, said, would you please let us nationalize your guard so you can be removed from stopping African American people going to the University of Alabama? No.
All right, folks, here's the deal. We're diving deep into a heated exchange on Fox News, where Victor Davis Hanson goes toe-to-toe with Jessica Tarlov, taking no prisoners in a fiery back and forth that highlights their sharp ideological clash.
That interview said the downward spiral started in LA when the military arrived. Is that when it happened, or was it when protesters were hurling rocks at cops?
This is very small and isolated, and Donald Trump is doing what Donald Trump does best, and he's playing the same footage. He has that image, right, of that topless protester with the Mexican flag on top of a burning Waymo car, and it's terrible, and that guy should be prosecuted. You should not be able to do that, but that doesn't mean that in general that's what's going on here. So Gavin Newsom is speaking for a majority of Americans. Right before we came on air, there was a new Quinnipiac poll that was released. So Donald Trump, -12 on approval in general, -11 on immigration, and -16 on deportations. He has taken his best issue and decimated it. And now Americans and illegals, who, yes, they're here illegally, are living in fear of what the government is trying to do.
There's millions of dollars in damage. A lot of businesses got ransacked, and illegals should be a little scared. They broke into the country. A lot of them have committed crimes. I'd like them to be a little fearful, Jessica. Gavin Newsom's emasculated. Trump reached into his state, took his guard, and used it to protect the people that Gavin either couldn't or wouldn't do. Attacking democracy is not enforcing the law. All they're doing here is enforcing the law. And they can't even get their story straight. All right, first there was no riot, then there was a riot, then it was peaceful, then it was mostly peaceful, then Trump provoked the violence. So the National Guard provoked the riots? Because I didn't see a single National Guardsman melt down a Waymo or loot a store. Not one. You can't be held hostage in your own country by foreigners, because that's what this is. It's an extortion attempt. Every time you try to enforce the law, we're going to burn stuff. That's not how it works. Gavin thinks it's good politics to let your own city burn down. That's good politics.
This all centers around Trump's controversial use of government powers, sparking a fiery debate about immigration, law enforcement, and public order. Jessica Tarlov framed Trump's actions as authoritarian overreach, citing polls and public sentiment to argue that his policies escalated tensions and undermined democracy. But Victor Davis Hanson wasn't having it. He dismantled her case point by point, arguing that enforcing existing laws isn't oppression but necessary to combat chaos, and reminding viewers of historical precedents like JFK confronting George Wallace. While Tarlov leaned on polls suggesting Trump's approval was slipping, Hanson countered that such surveys are often skewed to mislead the public. He criticized her portrayal of protests as democracy in action, insisting that violence, attacks on police, property destruction, and foreign flags being waved look less like protest and more like invasion. He underscored this by pointing to stark border crossing illegally with only a fraction deported. Daily and warned that politicians like Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris risk their political futures by downplaying the crisis. Through it all, the clash between Tarlov and Hanson reflected the broader national divide over how to balance public safety, law enforcement, and democratic freedom.
It's interesting, the mayor, Karen Bass, came down in her public comments on the side of the protesters who were protesting the idea of deportation at all, kind of like Kamala Harris used to march against deportation. And Gavin Newsom then gave a series of editorializations that I think have ruined his chances ever to be a serious national candidate. He said this was chaotic, this was reckless. And he said that they were just trying to have an arbitrary deportation quota. Gavin, 12 million people came into the country illegally. That was 3 million a year. That was 250,000 per month. That was over 8,000 a day. They have not been able to deport more than 1,000 on most days, sometimes 500. They would have to deport 8,000 people every single day for 4 years to get back where we were with 20 million illegal aliens when Joe Biden entered office. So it's not a quota, it's an effort to stop an invasion. What I'm getting at is, on one side of these protesters, and I'll just give a word of advice. You're going to lose the optics, Democrats, left, and immigration protesters if you have a lot of people here illegally and they're waving the American, not the American flag, but the Mexican flag as they're committing acts of violence. Think of the logic. I am waving the flag of the country under no circumstances I want to return, but I am attacking the officers and the infrastructure of the country that under every circumstance I want to stay in. That might explain why in the midst of all of this negative publicity, a CBS poll taken to show that people were outraged showed that just the opposite. 54% of the American people are for continued deportation.
Calling out the chaos and dismissing these issues as mere politics, according to Hanson, does a disservice to those who are dealing with the real consequences on the ground. And he pushes back hard against what he sees as a media-driven narrative designed to obscure the facts. He points to a CBS poll showing that, contrary to Jessica Tarlov's claims, a majority of Americans actually support continued deportations, using it as evidence that the public is far more aligned with stricter border policies than many commentators want to admit. This clash over data underscores a deeper divide in public perception. While Tarlov interprets polls as proof that Trump's iron fist approach is unpopular and authoritarian, Hanson argues that these surveys are often skewed, manipulated, or misrepresented to create a particular story. He stresses that framing violent unrest, attacks on police, and destruction of property as democracy in action is misleading at best and dangerous at worst, insisting that such events resemble an invasion rather than peaceful protest, especially when foreign flags are raised in defiance of U.S. law and order. By drawing historical parallels and highlighting the sheer scale of illegal crossings compared to limited deportations, Hanson portrays decisive government intervention not as oppression but as a necessary step to restore order, protect citizens, and prevent local authorities from being overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Tarlov holds her ground, emphasizing what she sees as the authoritarian dangers of Trump's tactics and portraying the public as increasingly disillusioned with hardline policies. The debate ultimately becomes less about one poll or one policy and more about who controls the narrative, whether the facts reflect a genuine shift in public opinion or are being massaged to fit political agendas. And that's the crux of the televised clash. Hanson isn't just defending Trump, he's challenging the way facts are framed, who gets to interpret them, and how those interpretations shape national discourse. While Tarlov represents the opposing camp that warns of creeping authoritarianism, both are relentless, both are vocal, and together they embody the larger cultural and political battle raging across the country. So the real question for viewers is, who's closer to the truth? Hanson with his call for strong measures and law enforcement, or Tarlov with her warnings of dangerous overreach?